It's wonderful to have you here the night before Thanksgiving. And I'm excited to introduce the artist Ross Bleckner, whose work is held in collections around the world, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Contemporary Museum of Los Angeles, the Reina Sofia in Spain, the Whitney Museum in New York. Tonight, he will be in discussion with writer and essayist Frederic Tuten, whose works include The Adventures of Mao, On the Long March, and Tintin in the New World. The two will discuss Bleckner's new book, My Life in the New York Times, in which Bleckner has clipped bits of the New York Times for years and years, creating collages out of obituaries, quotations, and various pictures. This fascinating journal has helped to inform and inspire many of his paintings. Please join me in welcoming Ross Bleckner and Frederic Tuten.
Thank you, everybody.
I say thank you, too. I think that since we don't have a moderator to ask us interesting and poignant questions, I'll have to start saying some things about Ross myself, and I hope then he will follow with something interesting and poignant, mainly his book. There's a long tradition of artists using texts. I mean, you all know, I'm sure, Picasso and Braque embedding in their paintings clippings from newspapers, lines from newspapers, sometimes little advertisements from newspapers. So there's this notion of text and artists, text and visual art that has a kind of history. And I'm sure it is much more than that. I'm just being very slight about it. There is that idea. But it's interesting for me that Ross, as a painter, is not just taking texts and putting them into other visual works, but taking texts and creating another kind of thing, another kind of work, where the text has meaning in continuity. It has a narrative, and where the text on page also has its visual presence, has an aesthetic presence. You know, just to make this very brief, that the notion of using found materials, and it's not just Duchampian, but it's artists, Dada artists especially, would clip things from newspapers and throw them in a bowl and take them out and put them on a page and make poems out of them. So that the idea of usefulness of found materials is, you know, part of the history of our literature. So now, of course, Ross has done something very special, I think, which is to take from the New York Times one specific kind of text and find these little passages and have them accrete and have them come to some kind of narrative, subtext, and autobiography. So with that, all to say thank you, Ross, and I'd love you to talk more about your work now that I've said it. Now I've explained everything.
Okay, thank you. You know, I've always been fascinated with keeping journals, and you know, as an artist, you just find stuff, and you know, whether it's images, I mean, it's just the whole vocabulary of things that you look at and things that you read that you want to remember. And what I did is I keep these notebooks that have a lot of things in them, you know, including sketches and preparation for paintings and formulas for paint. I mean, everything. I mean, you know, I guess ever since like 16, I've kept some kind of journal. And, you know, some of it was written, some of it was found, just little, you know, remarks that other people said. And I guess it occurred to me that kind of in conjunction with my my interest, actually, in politics and, you know, the kind of... you know, I feel like I'm in my studio so much, and you sometimes, you know, your subjectivity is so much what the really business of being an artist is, that when I leave my studio, I'm very interested in really whether I agree with it or don't agree with it, kind of how the world is depicted. And obviously, I mean, there's a lot of a lot of venues for information, I kind of, look around for a lot of them, not just the New York Times, which is a kind of one way of getting the news, and certainly not all of it, and certainly not slanted in the way that would interest me the most. But it is, as far as newspapers go, one of the best newspapers in the country, and I've always read it very carefully. And I've actually learned a lot from it. And one of the things that I learned really was how you could turn this, which is of course what journalists always say, and what the whole argument about journalism is that it's allegedly objective. The objective facts, the objective news. The Times calls itself all the news that's fit to print. And I've always been interested how I could kind of cut it apart and kind of make it align with something completely subjective. So to take the news and to take things from the newspaper and kind of fit them into I guess my worldview. I went through many years of these notebooks that I kept. And what I decided to do when, I was thinking about maybe writing something myself, which is not something that I've decided not to do, but at first I thought I have all this material and I wanted to arrange it because, I take these things and they're kind of inspirational. I actually see it as a self-help book. It reminds me of things. It's like if anybody who's an artist here knows that, you put things around you sometimes, images, you put things on the wall, even if you're not an artist. You want to organize things, you remind yourself of things. It might be things as in going shopping, or it might be things in just be nicer to somebody or everybody. So I took all of these years and I kind of picked the things from the New York Times, and I kind of arranged them, I thought, a little bit narratively, kind of beginning, like thinking about creativity. It's a lot about creativity. Starting a career, the disappointments, the joys, the growing older, and of course the overriding, the overriding theme is, in all of art, is mortality. So, that's a lot of the quotes really refer back to that. I've always been really interested in obituaries, just because. Well,
I noticed that when I first got the book, in the first edition of this book, and I began to look at it, I thought, what is this thing? What strange, interesting thing this is. And then I began to look and see that these obituaries really were familial. They weren't just pulled out of nothing, someone died that you didn't know. They're really family. They were family obituaries. So that's when I got the clue that you were doing something that wasn't just making a nice collage of texts. And it was very personal. And I thought it was very, very intelligent. And I have a lot to say about this book. It's visually beautiful. It's an aesthetic object. You can just look at it and not even read the texts if you don't care that. But I was fascinated because I'm interested very much, at least historically speaking, interested in how people have tried to get away from the usual narrative, telling the story the usual way. And whether they break up the story so that it doesn't have beginning, middle, and end, and necessarily in that sequence, and all that stuff. And also, again, as I say, the history of people trying to grapple with the notion of texts and how they can use them, in different and fresh ways, which I think you've done, and I laud you for that. And in fact, I always think it's interesting. Did you stumble upon this idea, or did you see it in continuity from other sort of historicities of the notion of text? I don't know. I have a suspicion you just lucked into it.
No, it's just, it just has to do with little things I cut out. I've always cut out. It never even occurred to me that I was actually cutting out so much from the New York Times, but it happens to be one of the things that I read on a regular basis. And then I also realize, kind of like in the media-saturated technological world, when everything kind of went over to computer, and the papers were trying to figure out how to, kind of basically get away from printing, which I'm sure they will do one day. I realized that, I almost had a kind of an obituary about that in itself. So there was almost an evocation of time having passed to be able to clip out all these thoughts and to take what's, to take what's the hardcore news and really create a long poem out of it, that I'm using it for my purposes that have to do with, people that I've admired when they say things, or in book reviews of them, or movies. There are quotes, and that's where my eye focuses. And being an artist, I think that one of the most important thing is how you can take all of this information everywhere around you, and get rid of the things that you don't need, and just distill it to the things that you do need to move forward with your creative life. Maybe I should read a few that I can't read too many, because then I'll read the whole book. It ranges from politics to science to art, obviously. Let me just start with one, which I did. I have to put this down to turn the page.
I was going to turn the page for you. I can do it.
It's okay.
Imagine coming to a reading to hear someone read from the New York Times. It's like a daughter event.
That's funny.
While he's musing and selecting, I want to say another thing, which I thought I would introduce as a subject of his book, or as a sideline to his book, which is you have a patience for a moment to say this? Jacques Armand's essay on the death of literature. I'll talk about that after you finish reading.
Would love to hear about it.
Bye.
So the numbers here have changed it a little, because this is an old quote, but I like it because it gives me a way to think about the world outside myself. And a lot of these quotes, the purpose of them being in my book is to think kind of outside of my studio, because the more you think like outside your studio, I think the more you bring into your work. So it's like, if we can this is the quote, if we can shrink the world's population to a village of only 100 people, keeping all existing ratios the same, the village would look like this. There would be 57 Asians, 21 Europeans, 14 from the Western Hemisphere, North and South, and 21 Africans. 52 would be female, 70 would be non-white, and 30 white. 70 would be non-Christian, and 30 would be Christian. 6 of the 100 people would own 59% of all the wealth in the world. And all 6 of these people would be from the United States. 80 of the 100 people would live in substandard housing. 70 would be unable to read and write. 50 would suffer from malnutrition. 1 would have a college education. You know, when you kind of bring things down to that scale, it kind of drives home the point. And I always thought that was really interesting. I don't know how many of these I should read, Fred. What do you think?
Until they go home. Until they start throwing pellets at you.
Huh?
So they're throwing newspaper pellets at you. That you're waking, read a few
I mean,
more, it's
you
fun.
know, because I cut these out and I use them really for personal kind of, you know, inspiration, I don't really attribute whom wrote them or who the quotes come from or where they're from. But some I do know. This is an interesting one. Malaria is a disease we don't know very much in this country, but a disease that will kill 2 million children this year, overwhelmingly in Africa. 2 million children. Now, this is a disease that is largely preventable and 100% treatable, and the treatment costs 80 cents. But people are so poor that 2 million kids are going to die this year because they don't even get access to the simplest things, like a bed net treated with an insecticide that would protect them from this disease. Now, here's the basic arithmetic of our time. There are 30 million places in Africa, sleeping sites where people are vulnerable to being bitten by the disease. 300 million. Each bed net costs $5. I trust your economics course was sufficiently good so you can quickly calculate this. That's why I went for a PhD. I know that it's 1.5 billion. Or you could take out Excel if you want to do it that way. 1.5 billion. And yet almost none of these children sleeps under a bed net because they were just too poor. But what is 1.5 billion in today's world? This is what we spend every day on the Pentagon. That's our daily military budget. So here is a calculation, and here is the choice. One day's Pentagon spending would provide all sleeping sites in Africa with 5 years of bed net coverage to fend off a disease which kills millions every year. That's a choice. We haven't made it. My suggestion is the Pentagon take next Thursday off.
Who was that?
That's actually the economist Jeffrey Sachs. Maybe you could guess who this is, Fred. The book she writes in the first chapter is an attempt to make sense of any fixed idea I have ever had about death, about illness, about probability and luck, about good fortune and bad, about marriage and children and memory, about grief, about the ways in which people do and do not deal with the fact that life ends, about the shallowness of sanity, about life itself. A writer wrote that about her book.
Beautiful quote. I would have said Joan Didion, but I'm not sure.
You got it right.
Joan Didion? Yeah.
Yes. How do you like that?
Well, that's why we're together.
Huh?
That's why we're here together. You know, it just touches me so much that, you know, I spoke of this as an autobiography when we did this little talk at the Center for Fiction. I said you contrived an autobiography from, you know, seemingly objective texts. And the more we read from it, the more I realize how it's not just an autobiography of events in your life. It's an autobiography of the psyche. It's an autobiography of what you love and don't love, and what moves you, what frightens you, and what you feel protest about. I mean, that's beautifully done.
Well, you know, there's so many ways to you know, tell the story about our contemporary cultural life. And then I think that, you know, again, it has to do with the information that you look at and the information that you internalize and how you internalize it. And that's a choice that people make. You and I like to kind of remind myself, like, for instance, this is a quote that I kind of read. I actually have this book next to my bed, and I go through it once in a while. Because, like I said, it is a kind of a little bit like a self-help book, because it through other people's voices and through other people's thoughts and through other people's advice, I get, I get inspired. When I need to feel humble, I read this to myself. I believe that human consciousness is a conjuring trick designed to fool us into thinking we are in the presence of an inexplicable mystery. Who is the conjurer, and why is he/she doing it? The conjurer is natural selection, and the purpose has been to bolster human self-confidence and self-importance so as to increase the value we each place on our own and others' lives. I mean, I just think that's interesting in the sense that, it has to do with the fact that we're kind of accidental in the universe.
As you're turning the pages, I'd like people to know, if they could see it, how visually beautiful it is, and how even the little tape marks have a kind of wonderful composition to them. I use the word composition just roughly because it sounds so contrived, but it has such a beautiful look. It has such a beautiful feel to it.
And the middle of the book is really about being an artist and the kind of things that sometimes you forget. In the kind of the life and the trajectory of your life as an artist, sometimes you forget things. And one of the things you need to kind of stay focused on is why you became an artist. And not even when you feel disappointed or, which happens to everybody, it's like you have to kind of keep your focus and keep your work, or the work that you believe that you needed to do when you started to be an artist. You have to keep that in the forefront of your consciousness. So I read this. I think that her strongest gift as an artist, beyond her innate aesthetic ability, that she understood the necessity of getting a thing done within a time frame, with certain resources, with whatever means are available to you, Mr. Volpe said. And you don't stop yourself for fear of being imperfect or being judged. You just do it. And it's as good as it can possibly be, with all of your energy and soul and brains and guts and hands and eyes. And then you go on to the next one. And I think that's an outstanding way to live.
Well, that's touching. Who did that? Who wrote that?
I don't know.
That's a beautiful passage. That's really a beautiful passage.
I mean, you just kind of know that you get up the next day and you just go to work. Because there are so many things. I bet you'll know who wrote this. Because it gives it, and I just love it because, rarely do you find politicians who are so, politician philosophers, actually. They just don't come like this anymore. But anyway, the governor said that he had not sought solace from the pain of his loss, because campaigns are like all of life. They start with conjecture and hope. They are filled with unexpected gifts, undeserved rejections, inexplicable pain, incredible joy, confusion, vindication, everything, he said. And how do they end? I come from a religion where the whole symbol of the religion ended in condemnation and crucifixion. But that wasn't the measure of the experience. That's just the way it ended. And there's significance to it. I'm not comparing myself. I'm saying that this is a metaphor for everybody's life, that it is in the living, it is in the campaigning that you make your mark. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Do I dare ask you who that is? Do you know who that is?
Well, no, once I tell you, you'll absolutely know.
Well, of course, once you tell me, I'll know.
I know, but I mean, it will sound like he talks and thinks. Mario Cuomo.
Oh, really? Really? That's
Yeah.
so interesting.
Yeah, he was a
That really is interesting.
great guy.
I had,
He should have been president.
yeah.
And then I did a number of commencement speeches that had to do with like the idea of hope and beginnings and possibilities. You know, people discussing what the potential is for the audience. And they're always pretty interesting. One more flawless article of clothing, one more elaborate toy, the truly perfect diet, the harmless but necessary drug, the almost final elective surgery, the ultimate cosmetic, all designed to maintain hunger for stasis, while children are being eroticized into adults. Adults are being exoticized into eternal juvenilia. There is nothing more satisfying, more gratifying than true adulthood. The process of becoming one is not inevitable. Its achievement is a difficult beauty, an intensely hard-won glory, which commercial forces and cultural vapidity should not be permitted to deprive you of. Now, I think that's great advice for people going into the world.
So beautifully written. It saves you the time of having to write it yourself, Ross.
I could
That's
never.
another benefit.
Well, that's the other thing. You know, if I'm thinking about writing something, I'm looking at this. I could never write.
I'm just making a joke.
No, I know.
Yeah.
I always thought I was going to write. I like to write. I actually do write, and I always thought I want to write like a kind of memoir based on all these books that I've kept for so long, and I spent years trying to think of, knowing that if I could only think of the first sentence, it would be a great book.
Call me Ishmael.
You told me that once.
Just go-
I love
just
that.
go-
But
start with
that would be
the-
my book. I could never think of a sentence that I like enough to write the book. But I'm still working on it. This is another bit of advice. Do stuff. Be clenched. Be curious. Not waiting for inspiration's shove or society's kiss on your forehead. Pay attention. It's all about paying attention. It's all about taking in as much as what's out there as you can and not letting the excuses and the dreariness of some of the obligations you'll soon be incurring narrow your lives. Attention is vitality. It connects you with others. It makes you eager. Stay eager. You'll notice that I haven't talked about love or about happiness. I've talked about becoming or remaining the person who can be happy a lot of the time without thinking that being happy is what it's all about. It's not. It's about becoming the largest, most inclusive, most responsible person you can be. One of the reasons that's very important to me, as a bit of advice, actually, that's Susan Sontag. I know somebody you admire and we're very close to. Is, you know, because I always laugh when people say, so are you happy? I always laugh. I go, that's such an idiotic question. I mean, you know, what does it mean? Am I happy? I was happy for a few minutes yesterday. I feel calm, well, for a few minutes 3 days ago. But, you know, then I'm nervous. So, you know, there is, you know, it's not like something that you achieve and that you work on that stays with you. It's, you know, and this is what she addresses, that it's not about that. And as an artist, it's certainly not about that. It's about being engaged and being aware. And sometimes being engaged and being aware does not make you happy, especially if you're reading the newspaper.
Years ago, many years ago, Susan Sontag and I were having lunch or dinner or something like that. And I said to her, Susan, are you happy? And she looked at me, she said, "Do you take me for an idiot?" And I felt so embarrassed. I knew she, I just meant it as a kind of congenial,
Right.
opening line to have a conversation with. And she,
Well,
she meant exactly
I always
that.
kid around like, when you see people casually and they go, even how are you? I always go, what if I really told you the truth? You would really regret asking. But anyway, back to Susan Sontag a little. This is from her, which I thought was fascinating, in her obituary in the Times. I had never read one with so many adjectives. She was described variously as explosive, anticlimactic, original, derivative, naive, sophisticated, approachable, aloof, condescending, populist, puritanical, cyberatic, sincere, posturing, ascetic, voluptuary, right-wing, left-wing, profound, superficial, ardent, bloodless, dogmatic, ambivalent, lucid, inscrutable, visceral, reasoned, chilly, effusive, relevant, passé, ambivalent, tenacious, ecstatic, melancholic, humorous, humorless, deadpan, rhapsodic, cantankerous, and clever. No one ever called her dull.
No one ever called her dull?
Dull.
I thought you said doll. No one ever called her doll. Imagine
They would've got smacked.
Sontag, hi, doll. That would have been, yeah. That's a beautiful thing. Who wrote that, do you think? Is it just
the obituary
who wrote the
writer.
obituary? Well, I know, but there's obituary writer isn't someone like God. It's,
Well, I don't know
It's
who
a
wrote
person
that.
who writes these obituaries. They're persons. They haven't prepared in advance even.
And again,
maybe yours.
I wish I would.
Your
I mean,
obituary is being
I think
prepared
it's
now.
great, obituary writing. Talking about creativity and back to the kind of advice about creativity and just getting up. I always love this, and I actually really think about this one a lot. There's always something that has to be done, he says. You have a deadline or a show, and there's a pile of stuff on your desk. I heard once that Brancusi used to start the day by sweeping the studio floor. Every morning he'd get up and sweep the floor. And by the time he got the floor swept, he was already involved in life of the studio. I just go there and I don't really think about it, and I see what's around to do. I really like that because, I'm a kind of obsessive-compulsive organizer, and after I've organized everything for the umpteenth time, I have nothing left to do but get to work. So, and I realized when I read this, it made me feel better, because, if Brancusi could go to the studio and just sweep, then if I just move things around, it's kind of like the same. It's an engagement in the life of the studio, which is probably the most important thing. Actually, it's funny because it reminds me of what Philip Roth said in the paper the other day, that he was retiring because he couldn't deal with sitting in his studio and writing all these pages day after day just to throw them out. Now that he's 80 years old, he doesn't want to do it anymore. He can't bear the pain. And I like that because, it just had to do with that life of the studio, whether it works or doesn't work. You leave, it doesn't work. And how do you get back there the next day? Well, you have to organize, so you have to sweep. That's how.
Well, each person has his own formula for getting to work. And
I like
when Roth says that he throws away 5 pages, he said, I thought to myself, it's wonderful to have 5 pages to throw away. That's kind of great. Yeah. I mean, as I say...
Well, he's famously prolific.
Yeah, he's famously prolific. Also, he had no radio in his room or television in his room or anything, just a naked room with a big table. That's a good way to work. But I think, just to be jocular about it, each has his own way and system. If you have a system that includes getting up in the morning, making your coffee, and then having another coffee, and then sort of looking at the ceiling for a while, and then going to your room and looking at your email for about an hour or two.
This is what you do?
And then think about lunch. I mean, that's a system. And then when you've exhausted all the possibilities, there's no more email, no more Facebook.
No more eating.
No, you make another coffee.
And then the day's almost done.
Well, then no, this is the afternoon for lunch. And then there's a couple of hours for work. We all have our systems.
That's true. I don't know if I like that one as much as the sweeping the floor in the morning. Mr. Smith is about happiness again. Mr. Smith paraphrased a Zen Buddhist saying he once heard in Japan, quote, "The real master in the art of living makes little distinction between his art and his leisure," he said. "He simply pursues his vision of excellence in whatever he does, leaving others to decide whether he is working or playing. To him, he is always doing both." Which I do like, because I always say, life is very stressful and work is very pleasurable, which is, why, you go on a vacation, you worry about where you're going. Getting there is a nightmare. It's hot when you get there. You have to adjust to it. The hotel room isn't really what you wanted it to be. It's like, do you think to yourself, why did I do this?
Can you find something that's not so much like self-help and heuristically, encouraging to life? Maybe something a little more depressing?
You want something to...
I'm only kidding around.
I think it's all
I think I'm reading, a cheerleading book about life. I want to give us something, a little variety here.
This is really nice. This is really from if you look at the obituaries, they have the little memorials on the bottom. Actually, one of the best memorials I ever saw is on the back of the book. I had to put it on the back of the book. It says, Fuchs Theodore. "Even though I'm dead, I still love you, Gladys."
Oh, wow.
I'm looking at that and I think, holy
God, that's something. Really,
Huh?
that's beautiful. That really is
Somebody took an ad out before they died.
My God, what a beautiful thing to say. What a beautiful thing. God.
Huh?
It's really touching, that.
Just to think of that, I want to kind of book all my ads to different people as I go along. Okay, this is May 2009. This is a memorial. "I am not there. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn's rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die." Another memorial.
Oh.
You look, it's very touching. And another reason I do like, I read the paper. The last thing I read is the obituaries. And the first thing I think is how little time is left. I close the paper quickly and rush out my apartment to get to work.
Maybe we should end there.
What?
Maybe we should end there.
Well, nobody threw anything at us yet. Okay, maybe I'll read one more.
No, I didn't mean that to terminate. I just meant that was so touching.
It's nice.
It's really beautiful, yeah.
Well, I'm almost at the end here. "As you float now, where I held you and let go, remember when fear cramps your heart what I told you. Lie gently and wide to the light year, stars. Lie back, and the sea will hold you." This is one of my favorite suicide notes. No more games. This is real. No more games, no more bombs, no more walking, no more fun, no more swimming. 67. That is 17 years past 50. 17 more than I needed or wanted. Boring. I am always bitchy. No fun for anyone. 67. You're getting greedy. Act your old age. Relax. this won't hurt.
Wow. You know, I would have said George Sanders. You remember George Sanders?
I do.
Who committed suicide in a hotel in Madrid?
This is Hunter Thompson.
Oh my gosh. You know, George Sanders said, he left a note in a hotel. He said,
I'm
it's
bored.
just too boring. It's just too boring. Isn't it? I'm bored, yeah. God, I'm not going to say that.
Well, this is another suicide. I mean, I don't know. It just...
Can I just interrupt you for a second? Because I want to go back on this theme of autobiography and memoir. May I just do that?
Of course.
And explain what your book is about?
Yes.
All art is choice. I mean, you're talking about taking from the world, but all artists, writers, poets take from the world, take something from the world. We have to synthesize. We can't include it all. You have to winnow it down. You have to make the winnowing down the key, the synthesis, the key to the emotion or the key to the narrative. And what I always thought about this book and loved about this book was how in your choices talk about you. Your choices are you. Your choices of this objective texts really become the emotion of you. They're the emblems of the self. And that's what I thought so highly of it and thought so beautifully of it. So without having to actually say all this stuff, it's been said for you. And you say it through the selection. You say it through the juxtapositions. I thought that was very intelligent and fresh and in a way noble, too.
Well, thank you. I mean, you know, when you're looking at things and you're reading things that other people write, a lot of times you think, I was thinking this, I just didn't have it clear in my mind. You know, but this is, you know, that's what a good book does in a way. You know, you could be there. You could be in that train of thought. You just didn't know that's how it was said.
Well, another way of saying it is that sometimes there are texts, I hate to make it sound so neutral, but there are passages, works that you know are what you feel, but you can never express it as eloquently or as beautifully. So one strategy is to take that and include it in your own book. You know, to take that dialogue or that whatever it is you say and just make use of it. That's another way of thinking of that.
I like that.
Yeah, well, I've done that.
I know, your book, Mao.
Yeah, well, I mean, in my novel, Mao, Adventures of Mao and the Long March, there's a long passage where Mao is talking to his troops, his exhausted and tired troops, and they just want to sleep. But he's up to educating them. It's kind of serio-comic, and he wants to explain to them the history of monogamy. So he starts to lecture them. And the lecture is an entire text from Engels' Origin of Private Property in the State. It's all about the rise of monogamy through property. So I thought, I'm not going to sit there and synthesize that. I'll just take the text
Just write it.
and just
You'll just quote it.
Embed it, yeah, make it as if it's dialogue. So I just mean to say there are ways in which these passages that you're using also can be sensed as things that speak for you eloquently in a way that you yourself, however much you feel it, couldn't really nail it down as exactly as that.
And they're so concise.
Yeah.
The only truth is face to face, the poem whose words become your mouth. And dying in black and white, we fight for what we love, not are. The last one is too long, I won't read it.
You think we should ask if anyone
Yeah, has any question?
in this extraordinary audience of ours have anything you want to ask?
Well, the camera can't see the audience.
Well,
but
they shouldn't see the audience. It's just
if
the
they
camera-
saw the audience, they would. I can't even see the back of where it ends.
The camera could not encompass the depth and breadth of this audience.
I know, it's
Just could
unbelievable.
not. And also their intense, passionate look, the gaze on their faces would destroy the camera.
Uh-huh.
So is there anything anyone would...
Each one of them, when they leave, is getting $10.
You know, there was a time, I guess, when you could just go out to the Bowery, which is now, the Bowery is too chic. But you go out to the Bowery, and for a quarter, you can get like a whole bunch of people come and sit here.
Did you ever do that?
No,
Are you giving us a little secret of
I was the one who was given
life?
the quarter to.
What?
I was the one who was given the quarter to.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So I don't know. I mean, if you care
I
to,
have a question. A long time ago,
can you be heard? Do you need this microphone? Do you need some?
a long time ago, you did a book, I think, for Twin Palms, is that what it's called?
Uh-huh.
Where you had collected I think it's the third page, the above the fold, third page of the New York Times,
Right.
with the ad and the,
And the Tiffany.
yes. And so it was about this juxtaposition of this advertising, which was about.
But that's another book. I mean, this is...
Can you just repeat this, because I don't think anyone
I
can
did
hear, 'cause what you
another
just said.
book she's talking about called page 3, which is, this is called My Life in the New York Times. That one is called Our Lives in the New York Times, because, it had to do, it's like that kind of 19th, 20th century thing. It's the life that is about me, the Freudian thing, and the world that I'm included in, which is more like Walter Benjamin. So that I kind of wanted to juxtapose those two. This is the life about me, my life, and that's our lives. And what it is just a collection of very strange juxtapositions where the Tiffany ad always happens to be on the upper right box on page 3 next to the international disaster of the day photojournalistic ad. So I think one of the first ones I noticed, which is a very famous photo, that the photojournalist, name I don't know, killed himself. He took a picture. He won, what did he win? A Pulitzer. He took a picture of a starving kid in Africa and a vulture waiting for the kid to die. So that was the frame. And in the picture on the right was a pendant of an elephant for like $10,000 looking the same at the kid because it was facing left. So you have the $10,000 pendant, the vulture, and the kid. Just the graphics of it was so intense. And it just had to do, with the tragedy, the irony that we live with every day. And, you still go to your studio and sweep. But this, and it's really, I mean, it was way before the 1% was called the 1%. But, you saw that, and you saw that. And I always thought, this can't be a coincidence. They almost there's almost a commentary going on here. Because the picture was so, talked so much to the ad about having and not having. It would be the same image. It would be some guy carrying an image of a water bottle to a place in the desert miles and miles away, and then on the other side you have a picture of a little flask that's a water bottle that costs $8,000. I mean, it just all these images that occurred which were so similar and talked about, the difference between having and not having.
What's your next project from the point of view of books? I don't mean painting.
Books?
Yeah, you have any other books you want to do?
I do.
Well, can you talk about it tonight? I'm encouraging you, so for the next time we have an event here,
something
line up.
with letters and photographs. But letters that have to do with my family. I just have a lot of letters when I was young that I wrote to my father, who was very, very absent in my life. But I used to write him letters anyway. So just going through those, they were very, they really were about, begging and hoping and wanting and identity and sexuality. You know, even though I didn't know any of that then. When I look at them now, I see, you know, wondering where he was and why he's always away and things like that.
Did you wrote these letters and didn't send them? So you have
I did
them?
not send them.
So you have what you
Yeah.
wrote. That's what I meant.
It was like a journal, but they were actual letters, and I didn't really send them because I didn't know where to send them to.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think
Maybe take
one question,
audience.
yeah, and then we should say goodbye.
Do a sign.
I know that people are sighing with sadness for our leaving, but what can we do? We have to. Tomorrow you have to go and have your turkey.
I know.
Start making your journey. Some people have come here, they're staying here, and they have to
Well,
go all
also
the way.
the bus is waiting on the street
Yeah.
to take everybody.
Yeah, that bus.
You know,
the Strand,
with
the Strand bus.
The three buses.
Yeah, yeah, the
There are
Strand
three
Venus
buses
bus.
to take the audience where they need to go.
So I don't know, is there someone here, some courageous soul, have a question to ask of any sort?
Well, in that case, thanks for coming, and have a happy Thanksgiving.